Virginijus, what's the weirdest animal you've ever come across?
Maybe politicians without a backbone?
I'll take it. Hello, I'm Simon McKegney and welcome to this episode of Unfiltered Conversation, the podcast where we break down the big green political issues with your green IFA politicians in the EU. Today we're going to talk about nature. You might think that's not very surprising coming from the Greens, but this topic is not just polar bears and pandas, although who doesn't love polar bears and pandas? Today we want to explore how nature improves both our mental and physical health, how people are restoring nature to protect towns from floods, how it's vital for farmers to grow our crops and ensure that we can keep food on our table, and of course for coping with the extremes of climate change. Nature makes our lives better, but it's more and more under threat from the right and far-right forces in Europe and across the world. Here to discuss with me today are Jutta Paulus and Virginijus Sinkevičius, both active members of the European Parliament, experts in their field and passionate nature lovers. You're both very welcome. We first go to Virginijus, and this segment we'll try to just get to know you a little bit before we get into the deep dive on nature in particular. Virginijus, you were commissioner in the last mandate, one of the youngest, if not the youngest commissioners ever, I believe. So I'm sure you have some very interesting stories when you were creating nature laws, how that worked. But firstly, how did you get there? How did you get into where you are now?
Into politics, you mean?
Yeah.
In general? I've never had sort of plans in my life to go into politics, but I sort of followed what's happening in the world, probably because one of my favorite subjects at school was always history, and I could always kind of connect the dots. Then, I graduated economics, after that international relations, and spent some time in one of the think tanks in the US, and then came back to Lithuania, started working for the agency which actually attracts investments to Lithuania. So I worked on policies a lot to ensure that Lithuania is competitive among the European countries to attract the foreign investments. And suddenly the opportunity appeared when one of the political parties invited me maybe first to join and help them with the program for the elections. Then they offered me to run. At first I was very, very hesitant, but then I accepted the offer, and it's now been 10 years in this journey.
Was nature something then that came with the portfolio that you got as in the commission, or was it something you felt strongly about as a political thing that needed to be worked on, supported?
I think as a human being, you cannot just sort of side away from nature. And I grew up in Vilnius, but I would spend every summer in village. So I always had this close connection. And for Lithuanians, the key things are their forests and lakes. It's unimaginable that it would be polluted, and of course the Baltic Sea. So that connection, it always exists. But of course the portfolio, it was the choice firstly, of course, assigned by the president of the commission. We've talked about it quite long, because before that I've served as a minister of economy. It's suddenly a shift into sort of more sort of green nature portfolio. But Commission President von der Leyen, she said that she sees that young person has to lead this portfolio. It has to be different than it was before, and of course it was one of the key portfolios within the Green Deal, which now seems like something very difficult for the current times. But 5 years ago, that was a key policy in the EU, and for me arriving, I was, looking through the book of ideas. All the DGs, they provide an ideas for the beginning of the mandate for a new commission. Everything was green.
Yeah.
Even Erasmus was going green.
Yeah. Maybe we get into that change in the last year from the last mandate in a minute. But first, Jutta, you come from a science background. Was there a logic there or a reason from your science background to switch into a political life?
Well, I do come from a family that is a lot into natural science. Both my parents were teachers from math and physics, so there was always this background wanting to do something with natural science. So I first thought about chemistry, then settled to pharmacy due to let's say, other reasons. And then I co-founded a laboratory together with my former husband and a third person, and we actually did analyses on indoor pollutants, and also already in the 1990s on ecotoxicology, which was a very new field of science back then. And then REACH arrived, so the European Chemicals Regulation, and we were entrusted by our customers with doing the respective studies. And then I found out that there are a lot of backdoors and loopholes in this regulation. I thought, this has to change. So it was one of the things that brought me to politics, being able to work on this and also being able to work on the other planetary boundaries which we have crossed. Climate crisis, biodiversity loss, destruction of forests. So all these issues that have to be tackled for us humans in order to have a future on this planet. So yes, there was something already in my pre-political life. I mean, I have become a professional politician rather late, at the age of 50, becoming the chairperson of the Greens in Rhineland-Palatinate, but that was the primary driver. We have to act on this now.
Yeah. Let's deep dive then into the issue itself, and maybe Virginijus, you touched on this switch from the last mandate with the green portfolio and ideas everywhere and how that's switched. We set the scene very clearly. Nature is very much under threat. We saw terrible wildfires across Europe this summer, rivers with toxic chemicals. We see the forest burning and animals disappearing. How serious, we'll get to the happy bit in a minute, but it's good to also look at it in how serious it is, and the politics not aligning at all with the seriousness of the issue. From what you've seen in the last years, how serious do you think it is, the issue of nature in retreat?
Well, we're losing increased plots of forests. Our rivers and seas getting increasingly polluted, and not only by plastic. Pollution is all sorts of, and it's killing the ecosystems. And you can look at it from different perspectives. And while being a commissioner, I would meet different communities, and the most shocking thing that you see is how quickly those communities that dependent on nature, they've been deprived, and that was already then not only a natural disaster but socio-economic as well. Fishers, foresters, that's the first example, but then of course farmers too. And I think very often we get a little bit mixed in those discussions and losing really the communities that depend on them, not large, let's say, agribusinesses who operate as proper run business, with lawyers, with proper business planning and paying dividends for the stakeholders, but really the small communities, the farmers that really care and depend only on that land that they own, the fishers that have a small boat and depend on that catch of the day, where it's a pure family run sort of small business. We truly lose them, and I think that's extremely shocking that sometimes we ignore what is the true cause of those socio-economic issues that we have, not only across actually Europe, but across the other continents too. You see what's happening in the Amazon, and it's been a long time that we've been trying to find a solution. And I think the previous mandate gave a unique opportunity window to place deforestation regulation, which was extremely difficult to craft, absolutely. But if you want to have a real tool that wouldn't be teethless, that would really be able, to do change, this was exactly the proposal, which is now being second time postponed from the implementation. Then I really, find those difficult moments, because we are now speaking, if, 5 years ago as a commissioner, I would be in New York in General Assembly, most likely, meeting different stakeholders. And many of them on the stage we will be speaking about, how they truly, deeply care about nature, about the climate policy, and how they're ready to go an extra mile. At that time, different memorandums were signed, people were holding hands and uniting, but then you go back and you are not able to land a policy which would be effective and actually following through with the words. Well, and this is really a pessimistic picture, no?
Yeah, but I mean, we're clearly in the phase of the Empire Strikes Back. So we have those large companies, often globalized companies, that actually reap profits from the destruction of nature. And the problem with our economic system is that these factors are externalized, as the official language is. So it's simply not appearing on the balance sheet. And we're only starting now to really put a value on those ecosystem services. I mean, this is also a very technical term, ecosystem services. If you ask anyone on the street, they would say, huh? If you say, nature is providing us with water that we can drink, air that we can breathe, salt that we can grow our food on. And everyone is like, oh yeah, that could be important also for our economy. But it's not factored in. And for me, the most shocking thing is talking to colleagues that say, well, the scientists say that and the businesses say that, and we don't know who is right. And I'm like, well, the scientists don't earn money by saying this. On the contrary, they're just providing us with information, whereas a business wants to make profit, which is normal in our system. So why do you put them on equal footing? And that is, I think, one of the biggest problems, that the distrust in science and even the demonization of science has spread so much throughout the Western societies.
Can I ask, you said earlier about communities being most impacted by the destruction of nature, whether it's salmon rivers or forests. There's a vote there in local communities. People are voting for people and vice versa. There's different parties looking for that vote. Why do you think some parties, and I want to say particularly on the right now, that's the backlash that you talk about, why don't they see a vote in nature and the impact it has on ordinary people?
Well, I think, not communities that are affected, I think, they don't have a very often central stage. The nature is dying quietly, and that's also something that, is not easy to show on TV. When you see war, you see immediate death and etc. It's much easier to show. And I think on top of that, I think the most important that what Jutta is mentioned, that we take nature and services that nature provides us as something which is given and must be forever with us. Well, I think COVID was a very good reminder that, if you think that there is something for granted, you should think again, because there is nothing for granted, and especially those natural services that are slowly degrading. And I remember as a commissioner, raising the issue of the pollution in the Baltic Sea. Many countries around the Baltic Sea, and people living there, they were shocked. They always thought, oh, Baltic Sea has no issue. So it means they rarely, speak about it. They rarely hear about it on TV, or they rarely speak with the fishers in the Baltic Sea, who actually has no business case anymore.
But I think one aspect is also, we humans have always been great at making species go extinct, right? From the Stone Age already. And telling people you have to change your way of life, your way of doing business, is always something where people are reluctant. And if someone says, well, you have nothing to do with it, it's the seals that are eating all the fish. You don't have to fish less. You can just extract as much as you want. As soon as we kill off the seals, everything will be fine again. Let's go back to a past where everything was fine. Of course it wasn't. We just didn't know as much.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we're going to lighten it up a bit because I think it is a bit sad when you think too much about things, and we are going to get to the solutions later. But we're going to have a quick fire round now, and this is really either or questions for the first few. Jutta, otters or seals? That's literally on my page. You mentioned
Otters.
Seals. Otters. Do you have a reason why?
They're so cute.
Okay, I'll take it. Mountains or moors?
I'll go with the mountains, and to be honest, the moors is very British English, no? Here,
Yes.
so I had to Google it, no? But I'll go for mountains.
What's the mountain scenery like in Lithuania?
There is no mountains really in Lithuania, and probably that's why I kind of like it when you have. I think it's one of the greatest things for a holiday to go into the mountains. Doesn't matter actually if you do it in the summer for the hikes, for your recharge, or actually you do it in the winter if you have opportunity to ski.
Jutta, the most beautiful place on earth you've ever been?
It's not in Europe, I have to admit. It's Zion National Park in the USA.
Okay. Is it? When did you go there? What was it?
Oh, I went there 16 years ago. I have family in the US, and I visited my family together with my children, and then we took a tour around the big national parks of the US West. And I hadn't ever been to Zion National Park before, and it is extremely beautiful, extremely impressive. And the first settlers who got there called it Zion because for them it was close to paradise.
Okay, check it out. The last one, Virginijus, what's the weirdest animal you've ever come across?
Maybe politicians without the backbone.
I'll take it. Okay, we're going to move on to a Mythbuster round. You both have apparently 2 questions in front of you to ask the other. So,
shall I start?
Yeah, Jutta.
Yes.
For Virginijus.
Virginijus,
Yep.
nature protection is endangering food security. Why are you always against farmers?
Yes, that's actually a good one, and I have received it quite a lot. And on contrary, actually, I think we are together with the farmers are one team, because farmers, they depend on nature, on nature services. And I haven't met actually a person who loves their land more than actually farmers do, and who want to take care of it. But I think in general, our system, agricultural one, is set up on such a road that it's just terrible, because farmer who does the most difficult job, who depends on nature, who depends on a good seasons, on a good weather, he's the weakest link in this whole supply chain.
In terms of has the less protection, or
in all sorts of terms, because he is squeezed from the providers, he is squeezed from those who buy of him, so producers of food and etc. But also, if you look at the food production, we're doing extremely well in the EU. That's also a myth, because the numbers of food waste is increasing. Obesity is increasing as well, unfortunately, and especially among our children. And we exporting record amounts of food every year. So it's great what we have managed to achieve, but we should not forget, as I said, that it has a price. And I think farmer, as we imagine a farmer, a person who sustains the land, who grows certain crops and etc., also should be able from these activities to sustain themselves.
Yeah. And I think you have a question for Jutta as well. A mythbuster for Jutta.
The mythbuster. So this pollution is so little, it can never harm us. I bet you also heard it many times.
Yes, I actually do hear it many times, and I would like to link it to what you have just said, because that's also something where farmers are increasingly under pressure. I mean, Germany now has recognized Parkinson's disease as an occupational disease for farmers, because they are impacted by the use of pesticides so much. So they're under pressure too. But the general pollution, I mean, you can see the respective studies. The PFAS pollution alone is about 70 billion health cost for our societies every year. Young couples cannot have children because of PFAS pollution. We have increasing cancer rates because of PFAS or other mutagenous substances pollution. And of course it's true, air quality has increased in the last 20, 30 years. But why? Because we had management in place, because we had rules in place, because we had regulations in place, because we made industry clean up their factories, clean up the cars, clean up whatever they are emitting to the environment. So things have improved, but we are far from where we want to be. We are far from achieving the targets that the World Health Organization is setting for protecting the population.
And with something like PFAS, there is no European law on this, right? It's still...
Not yet.
Yeah.
Right now we have a proposal coming from 5 European countries for a general restriction for PFAS, which is under immense attack from the chemical industry, from the lobby, which says, well, we cannot live without using PFAS, which might be true for some of the things like appliances, exactly, like semiconductors, like electrolyzers, where we still need a lot of research. But we don't need research to ban PFAS from our food chain. We don't need research to ban PFAS from our frying pans, from our outdoor jackets.
Direct contact with where a person has a direct contact.
We should act on it as quickly as possible. We see that some member states are already taking action, like France, like Denmark, like Belgium, like the Netherlands. And I do hope that the EU will come forward with something very quickly, because else we are also impacting the internal market, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, what I really liked about this whole conversation is that it was very people-focused. So our last segment is really to end on a high, end on a bit of a positive, and a bit of a people-focused positive. What can people do in very dark times? So maybe I leave it open to the floor, but is there one win that you know of recently, one good thing that's happened for nature in the last few years or few months, or that you've spotted somewhere that gives you hope?
I mean, on the European level, obviously that we got the nature restoration law over the finish line, that there is now the legal obligation to restore, destroy, degraded ecosystem, which will make also our life safer, because a forest that has been restored to a better state will be able to cool its surroundings, will produce more oxygen, will produce more drinking water. So it's basically our life insurance. And if anyone needs examples, I can recommend this book, Hope Dies Last. It's short chapters about people that simply refuse to give up, like a young engineer in Iraq, of all countries, that didn't give up until he managed to restore the Shatt al-Arab ecosystem. And everyone said, this will never work. After a year, the fish were back, the plants were back, and it did work. Although everyone had said, in Iraq, are you crazy? No one will be able to work on this. He did.
And Iraq is a bit more complicated at times than Europe. Virginijus, ending on you, with EU politics, is there still hope that at EU level we can do good things for nature in the coming years?
I think the most important thing to realize that the mandate for politicians is formed by people, by electorate. And you could see some political parties, German elections, not the ones just now, but the ones before, some political parties that now, trying to dismantle the Green Deal, they were going even further with the promises than the Greens itself. So at the end of the day, politicians will move where the will of people is. Democracy works in Europe. It's a very difficult time with the social media, and I think we lose a lot of these narrative battles against the populists, and it's very difficult to for a politicians with the arguments, with the truth, to face this huge fight where everything is just spread false and lies around. trying to irritate people, and social media serves that extremely well. But at the end of the day, democracy works, and it's all in people's hands to form the mandate for a politicians of the world that they really want them to live in, their children to live in. So I think nothing is lost. It's a difficult time, a difficult mandate when you see a lot of things that were adopted previous mandate now being dismantled. But I think it will also, time will come when it will be realized that mistakes were done and the opportunities that were actually there, they were not used. Because we're not going to fight for a past economy. We will be fighting, and Europe's competitiveness has to be in the future economy. And that future economy can be built only on green, sustainable energy.
And giving up is not an option.
Absolutely.
Giving up is not an option, and I think the fight continues. So a big thank you to both of you for joining. That's all we have time for. If you like this conversation, you can find out how to subscribe to our podcast on greens.eu/podcast. If you want to join our fight for nature, join our Courage Club by going to greens.eu/Courage Club. This podcast has been a production of the Green EFA Group in the European Parliament with help from our editorial team, Katie, Alexian, Rita, Lena and Jeroen. Technical support was done by Andrea and Agnes. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you soon.